Hi again. F. Bruce, The Real Jesus, page 84, in the chapter Jesus in Jerusalem, Tribute to Caesar. When Judea became a Roman province in AD 6, its people were required, as a matter of course, to pay taxes to the imperial exchequer in Rome, and a census was held to assess the amount of taxation to be levied on the new province. The census sparked off a revolt led by one Judas, who was not himself a Judean by birth. He came from Gamala in Gaulonitis, that is the Golan Heights. He and his followers maintained that it was high treason against the God of Israel for his people to pay taxes drawn from the produce of the Holy Land to a non-Jewish ruler. This fourth philosophy, as Josephus calls it, was a completely new doctrine. Judea had been tributary to a succession of foreign empires for over 4 centuries, from the time of Nebuchadnezzar to the Maccabean Wars, and no prophet or other religious leader had ever suggested that there was anything improper about this. On the contrary, the prophets had taught that it was by God's providence or judgment that his people found themselves under foreign domination, so that any attempt to withhold tribute from their foreign overlords or otherwise revolt against them was opposition to the will of God. New as Judas's doctrine was, it was nevertheless popular. The payment of taxes was in any case an unwelcome burden, and when the people were told that the payment of taxes to this particular ruler was irreligious, they were disposed to believe it. Judas's revolt was crushed, but the spirit of revolt lived on. In due course, Judas's heirs formed the party of the Zealots, which in general accepted the teaching of the Pharisees, but added to it Judas's distinctive doctrine about the impiety of paying tribute to Caesar. It was the Zealots who played a dominant part in the revolt against Rome of AD 66, which led to the destruction of the temple and the city of Jerusalem 4 years later. But during the 60 years from AD 6 to 66, apart from the 3 years AD 41 to 44, when Judea was ruled by a member of the Herod family, appointed by the Roman emperor, the question of the propriety of paying tribute to Caesar remained a sensitive issue. The Galileans, governed as they were by a Jewish tetrarch, were not directly involved in this issue, but when Jesus came to Jerusalem and began teaching in the temple court, it was inevitable that he should be faced with the question. A teacher of such independent mind was likely to say something original. So he was approached and asked, "Is it in accordance with divine law to pay tribute to Caesar, yes or no?" The form in which the question was phrased might have presented many a teacher with a dilemma. If he said yes, he would forfeit much popular goodwill. If he said no, he could be charged with fomenting sedition. Jesus asked to be shown a sample of the money with which the imperial tribute was paid, and someone produced a Roman coin, a silver denarius. "Whose face is this?" he asked. "Whose name is here?" "Caesar's," was the answer. Then said he, "Give Caesar back what belongs to Caesar. Give God what belongs to God." To one whose total concern was the kingdom of God and his interests in the world, the question of which ruler received material tribute was one of minor importance. He urged his hearers to seek God's kingdom and righteousness, and if they made that their aim in life, paying Caesar back in his own coin, literally, would not affect it one way or the other. Jesus had no exaggerated esteem for rulers as such, whether for the tetrarch in Galilee, the chief priestly establishment in Jerusalem, the governor of Judea, or his master in Rome. To him they were all fallible human beings, occupying their positions by God's permission and responsible to him for their conduct. He saw the rich irony of the desire shown by some rulers in the Near Eastern world of that time for the honorific title Euergetes, that's Euergetes, which means benefactor. Such a title ought properly to be given to those who rendered service to others. It was strange that it should be sought by those who thought themselves entitled to receive service from others. There might have been the further implication that those who used a coin bearing Caesar's likeness stamped on it were deficient in their loyalty to the God of their fathers, whose law forbade graven images. Rabbinical tradition knows of certain Jews who paid such scrupulous heed to this prohibition that they refused even to look at a coin which bore an image. But if this implication is present in Jesus' words, it is not expressed and need not be labored. money was something of supreme unimportance in Jesus' eyes. It became important only when it was so eagerly sought after that it became an idol. If Caesar demanded money, he was demanding something of no great value in itself. Let him have it, especially when it was money which proclaimed itself to be already his. What God required was something infinitely more important. Let them see to it that God was not deprived of what belonged to him. Jesus not only avoided the dilemma, but turned it so as to emphasize the basic theme of his ministry. Caesar's just requirements are limited. God requires nothing less than all that his people have and are. Time was to come, later in the first century, when Caesar demanded from Jesus' followers that which was due to God alone, and they appreciated the main thrust of their master's teaching clearly enough to say no to Caesar. Those who hoped that Jesus' reply to their question would provide material for a charge of seditious speech must have been disappointed. On the other hand, his reply gave little comfort to any whose hopes of an early declaration of independence had been raised by the circumstances of his entry into Jerusalem. If Jesus commanded much less popular enthusiasm at the end of his last week in Jerusalem than at the beginning, his reply to the question about paying tribute to Caesar could explain this. All this time, however, the authorities had been considering the best way of forestalling the public disorder to which they feared Jesus' teaching and activity in Jerusalem might give rise, especially when so many pilgrims were congregating in the city. An opportunity of taking quiet but effective action to silence him presented itself when one of the 12, from motives which can only be guessed at, offered to enable them to arrest him when no inconvenient crowd was around. Next time, chapter 9, Jesus' last meals. I'll link to a video we did years ago on Daniel chapter 11 and 12, how God is in the details of prophecy, especially in Daniel 11. And those details bring down the whole Watchtower house of cards. And also put in a link to the Daniel playlist, which is quite extensive now. See you next time.